Hello, I'm Glenn W. Hunter, and with me is Tamika Carter. And together, what we're doing is building girl champs. Today, Tamika and I are looking at self image and confidence among young women, particularly young Black women. So, without further ado, Tamika, we're going to jump right in to what's going on with some of the young ladies that you particularly work with, particularly with regards to the therapy work and that you actually provide for them. So, to jump right in, when we think about some of these differences between self image and confidence, a lot of things overlap, but what are key differences in developing self image among young girls versus young boys?
A lot of those things do overlap for sure. You have, just sense of mastery, self-acceptance, how they look, how they act, how they perform academically. With males or females, those things will build self-confidence and self-image. I think the biggest difference with girls and boys is going to be that boys are typically socialized to be outspoken, to be leaders, and to be authoritative. And a lot of times with girls, we see those behaviors discouraged. If a girl's outspoken, she's talking too much, or, if she's a leader, she's bossy. And so to me, that's one of the biggest differences that I see is just how we socialize them, the things that we say, the ways that we reinforce when a young lady is authoritative, or the ways that we discourage it. That is really just ultimately it comes down to how we treat that youngster when they are coming up, when they are developing. Boys a lot of times, of course, are encouraged to be more rugged, and let me tell you, a lot of girls, I have worked with a lot of young girls probably in that, I'd say 14, they'd be about 14 age range about now, that honestly have a lot of hyperactivity and a lot of movement. I've been seeing girls get labeled with ADHD a lot more often. And what's important to note in that is that people who are what I call movement gifted are going to move. They're going to wiggle in their seat because they want to be dancing. They want to be, playing football. They want to be doing something. And so a lot of times we are encouraging that in boys and discouraging it in girls. And, we've got a lot of little budding ballerinas, football players, martial arts, cheerleaders, basketball, all of those things that girls are developing into. And so we have to, as the world is going on, as society is maturing, understand that a lot of times girls are going to manifest some of those same things that we see and that we encourage in boys, and we have to encourage them in our daughters as well.
As you talk about encouraging it in our daughters, and it comes back to their self-image. I mean, they're seeing themselves as young ladies, but as you said, there's a lot of activity that they would traditionally not engage in, which now they embrace and dominate. So when you see someone that's that spirited and that willing to break those barriers, what is some of the advice that you give these young ladies to tell them to go ahead and be you in that regard?
Oh man, I tell them to close their eyes, right? Close their eyes, pretend no one's in the room, and do what you would naturally do if no one was there. That's one of the biggest things is, you hear that old when people are like gonna present, they say, imagine everyone in the room naked. Well, don't do that. I don't tell little girls to do that. But I do tell them that, everyone has an area they need to grow in. Everyone has some deficits, everyone has strengths, everyone has weaknesses. And so don't let the areas that you're weak in discourage you from shining in your strengths. You may not be the most eloquent of speech, but you might be able to whip up some French braids or some hair like nobody's business and let that shine. Don't let someone talk down on you because you don't read on the, whatever level. Yeah, work on that, but don't let a deficit in one area discourage you from shining in the area that you are truly gifted and talented in. Because a lot of times when you push a young lady in that area, it will make them recover in the other areas of their lives. So, again, you may have someone who is an athlete, who is a truly gifted basketball player, and maybe doesn't have the best grades, but pulling them away from what they love a lot of times will discourage them in every area of their life. Whereas going ahead and reinforcing their giftedness in that actual area will help them be more open to growing in some of the other areas that they need to grow in. And I say all this, I think we talked about this earlier. A lot of times people discourage youth from being athletic. And that is an area of giftedness. It truly is. Some people are gifted in visual, spatial capabilities. They're great artists. Some people are musically gifted. They don't have to be, gifted in just pure intelligence. So I think it's so important to stop discouraging kiddos because they are a great athlete and they're not the best mathematician. That is okay. The world needs all of us. So with young ladies, that's just something I always do is tell them to draw on their strengths. I use what's called a strengths-based perspective. We do not do deficit thinking in my office. We're not gonna, oh, you only got one mom, you only got one parent, you only got this, you didn't have that. No, we're going to focus on those strengths and we're going to build those and we're going to use those to make everything else in your life come up.
I really respect how you talked about the strength-based perspective. What's one of the techniques you use to build confidence when that strength isn't necessarily something that's conventionally embraced?
Yes, so I love Gestalt therapy. I don't know if I've shared before, I come from a humanistic or existential perspective. There are a lot of different theories within psychotherapy. One of the ones that I use, especially because people of color are typically spiritual, existential kind of people, is that. And so under that umbrella comes what's called Gestalt therapy. And in Gestalt therapy, it's really about unifying parts of the whole. So one of the techniques that we will use is kind of that proverbial one you see on TV, the empty chair, right? Where someone's sitting in a chair or they're sitting over here and they're talking to a chair that has no one in it. And so when we're doing that, we're attempting to get them to unify parts of the whole. So one technique I might have a young lady do is sit and be the version of herself that she's proud of, talking to the version or the aspect of herself that she's not proud of. And then they get to have a conversation and I get to facilitate that. I get to highlight and point out the areas in which she is denying herself the glory that she deserves. And I get to point out the areas in which I need her to be like, pat yourself on the back. And so I give her a model for that. I reinforce that. I have her work on repeating certain things, repeating certain phrases, self-affirmations, have them take it home for homework. And a lot of times it's really asking a person how they felt after they did that, right? Because people will do your homework and they won't think about it. But it's really important as a therapist, and if there are any therapists watching, that you do the work of asking them how it felt to even do that activity, right? Because a lot of times just looking in the mirror is hard for some girls. It's a place where they come and they see all of their flaws. So again, that's kind of one of the activities is Gestalt, or using empty chair, role reversal, or talking, unifying parts of the self, talking to parts of the self, talking to a past version of yourself. Those are some of the most excellent tools for really helping a person identify and work through self-image issues.
So, as you're looking at developing the young lady specifically, how does that change when ethnicity actually goes into the equation?
Wow. So that's a big one, right? So many intersections of gender and race and sexuality, but I'll try to keep it pretty succinct as possible. I talked earlier about boys and girls, right? So how boys are a lot of times influenced and encouraged to be outspoken, to be leaders, to take charge, and girls not so much. Well, when you add on the layer of Black girl, you get things like angry Black woman when a person takes charge. You get things like acting white when she chooses to be the top in the class. So it's kind of really just comes down to a matter of what we're reinforcing and what we're encouraging. A lot of times Black girls are critical thinkers, right? So one of the manifestations of giftedness in African American girls is being a critical thinker. What does that look like in a classroom? It looks like a lot of questions. It looks like a teacher sometimes feeling challenged when it wasn't even about challenging or disrespecting them. It was really just about gaining a deeper understanding of the subject matter. So a lot of these behaviors in Black girls are coded as something negative. They're labeled as something negative. So in trying to get them to be more confident, you got to clear those spaces. You got to check some of those teachers. I don't check maybe isn't the right word, but you need to have a conversation. I've had to have a conversation with a teacher with my daughter because they chose to harp on a certain physical characteristic of my child, her Afro puffs, in a way that was kind of demeaning. And so we got to be vigilant as parents or caregivers of youth to go in and ask the questions. You know, when your kids come home and tell you a story, your daughter comes and tells you a story, you ask her again, how'd you feel when that happened though? Like, I know you're kind of laughing about it, but how'd you feel? And then we got to know when to step in, because their world should reflect should reflect happiness, joy, and things that encourage them to be great people, and not things that tear at them. So,
Mhm.
you know, if that means, one book I read means said, you know, if you have a gifted Black girl, you may have to drive clear across town for her to find somebody to be friends with, because chances are whoever she's with in whatever school she's in is not supporting it. You know, a lot of times when we have African American girls in majority African American schools, there's this kind of, again, this, you're acting white if she chooses to pursue intelligence. You might have a Black girl, a gifted Black girl in a school that's predominantly white, and they don't know what to do with her either, right? Because when she starts asking questions and critically thinking and you know, really getting into it and really getting into her learning, it looks like aggression sometimes. It can look like aggression for people who are not people of color, because the way that we communicate, the way we dialogue, when there's two of us going back and forth, a lot of times they don't know if we're fighting or you know, are we learning? So you know, I think I have so much to say about that topic, but I will just kind of bring it back to that. Make sure you're encouraging her to accept herself, including her looks, whether her hair is thick, thin, short, long, whatever. Encourage her to accept that, and then if there's something she doesn't like that she can change, encourage that as well. Encourage a sense of mastery. That is something that builds confidence a lot from a very young age, usually around 7 or 8. Little later, people are starting to establish a sense of mastery over something, whether they're the best Lego builder, the best doll makeup doer, the best cheerleader, the best tennis player, whatever. That sense of mastery, feeling like you mastered something, is what builds confidence. So for girls of color, especially if they're in a low income environment, there are not a lot of opportunities for that sense of mastery. Mom and dad can't always afford ballet or piano lessons. So academics becomes the chief place for a girl to have a sense of mastery, a Black girl, a lot of time, because school's typically free, right? It's public. And so it's so important to really assess and pay attention to what's happening with her at school. Again, school is the kind of after the family, it's the second place that people are socialized. When younger ladies make it to about middle school, that's really all that matters to them, is what their friends say. So it's just really important to pay attention to the areas that we're sending them, that are shaping them, to know when to defend them and when to encourage them in the things that make them unique.
Wow. So, I mean, I definitely respect the way you talked about, being encouraging and identifying mastery, particularly in developing young Black girls, where there's a lot of social pressure not to do that, right? But you still have to be able to identify where that need comes from, because a lot of our young ladies quickly learn to adapt by maybe moving to the back of the class, or not being as engaging, or not standing out so that they're not singled out. And what you end up with is a manifestation of low confidence.
Mhm.
So what are some of the signs of low confidence, particularly among young Black girls, that need to be managed so that they are able to flourish?
You said it, right? That sneaking to the back of the classroom, that being quiet when you have something to say. I notice a lot of parents, especially with Black girls who are on the spectrum, that is a whole nother show. How often Black girls are on the autism spectrum and it's not diagnosed is what it actually is.
Mhm.
But a lot of times I work with a lot of parents of girls, and it's like, man, she was brilliant. Like, man, fifth grade, she was knocking it out the park. Like, man, she was top of the class, reading 3 levels above everybody and getting her stuff done. And then something happens between like fifth grade and seventh grade, and you're like, who is this? Who is this child? Where did her brain go? This is not who I raised. This is not who I invested in. Why do I know she knew the answer, but she still didn't raise her hand? That's what we see. And that's when you can see that social pressure. And I actually had a little graphic I made once for asking about that. And so you want to ask about the environment first. Again, just going back to school, a lot of my work has been in school-based practice, is ask that young lady about that environment. Does she feel encouraged and supported in that environment? What happens when she raises her hand? What happens when she gets the answer right? Do people tisk and whatever? For me, I remember growing up, people would be mad at me because the teacher would say, you know, hey, we're gonna have a quiz today. Who studied? And I'd be like, well, I did. And I look around and like nobody else did, right? And so the teacher's like, well, somebody studied, so we're having a quiz. And everybody in the class is like, man, Tamika, you messed it up for all of us. We were gonna get to skate. So that's when I started getting quiet. That's when I started pretending I hadn't done my work. And that's really important because we see girls and we think they're supposed to be so sweet, quiet, they're not supposed to say anything. It's okay to be shy and reserved. But when there's a time when they should speak up, whether it's for protecting themselves, protecting their loved ones, or just helping themselves, advance in some area, if they're being quiet, that is a sign that their confidence is low. Another one is when they let people take advantage of them. So something I deal with a lot in working with elementary age girls is when they'll like have a bully, and then they'll tell you about this bully, right? They're awful mean girl bullying them. And then the next week she's like, I brought a t-shirt for the bully. I gave her my comb. And you're like, well, hold on, wait, that's not how this works. And so when you start seeing your daughter trying to kind of give stuff away to earn or buy someone's appreciation or affection, it might be a boy, it might be a girl, might be a friend, whoever it is. When you start noticing them trying to buy attention or affection or whatever it is, buy support with objects, that is a huge sign that her confidence is out of whack. I could go on and on and on, but I think those are kind of the two biggest places we see it in relations, and then their ability to verbalize and articulate whatever's going on, or about whatever's going on.
Wow. Tamika, you are giving such an incredible depth to some of the challenges that these young ladies have. I mean, but again, you factor in ethnicity, some of the social economic issues, and the layers just keep coming. But as we both have seen, there is perseverance and we do see success characteristics. And working toward those success stories, for lack of a better term, is someone who's providing guidance and probably some professional care to basically maximize the potential that these young ladies have. You're that person. How do people reach you?
You can reach me on my website, TamikaJCarter.com. That's TAMIKAJ Carter.com. If you go there, you can take the time to book a quick session. We will figure out where you are and where we need to get started to help build your daughter or you to being a champ.
Outstanding. Again, this is Building Girl Champs. That is Tamika Carter, licensed therapist. And we thank you for your attention. We thank you, Tamika, for the insight. And I can't wait to see what we come up with next week as we are building Girl Champs. Thank you all.
Peace.